All right, so we have Jonna Lawther. She joins us from Edmonton, and she is the Director of Programs and Services with Caregivers Alberta. I'm not going to explain too much about Caregivers Alberta because that is part of her presentation. So I will leave the rest up to Jonna, and welcome and enjoy our final speaker.
Hello, hi everybody, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I didn't get training on the clicker, so I assume it's just the arrow that's pointing, right? Okay, good deal, good deal. Thank you, Wendy and Ellen, for helping organize this, and I'm sure there was many more people assisting with that process, but I think it's really lovely that you have organized this to look for additional supports and services and resources to highlight for caregivers, whether that's family or friend or you in the room. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about us, who we are, and I always like to just kind of balance the room real quick and say, how many of you in this room are currently caring for someone by helping them get to a doctor's appointment? Raise your hand. Oh, a lot of people on that one. Okay, okay. How many of you are helping someone due to some depression or anxiety or mental health challenges? How many of you are directly caring for someone in their daily needs, helping them bathe, eat? A lot of us, yeah. I gotta figure out where I'm at here on my presentation. We are caregivers who care. In this room and standing in front of you, I myself am a family caregiver. And what's really lovely about our organization is that practically 100% of our staff are also family caregivers. It's not required and it's not a prerequisite to work for us, but it's really nice that we understand the role and we understand what it's like. And so when you access our coaching services, you're speaking to someone who's been there and has done that and knows exactly what you're feeling. Maybe not the exact same situation, right? We all have different responses and different situations. The story that we just watched with Tracy and Jim brought a lot of my own personal memories back of some of my caregiving, which I'll tell you about, but so many rich things that were said in there to walk away with. And of course the first speaker, Phil, and we do. And so I asked you earlier, and so for those of you on screen joining us today, are you caring, are you supporting someone with an illness, disability, or aging-related needs? Are you helping someone with mental health challenges, helping someone to appointments or getting groceries? And if so, then you are a caregiver. That's our description of a caregiver. Caregivers are parents of children with disabilities. They are spouses of someone with a disease, an illness, or a disability. They're children, adult children, and young children. There are caregivers known as young as 7 here in Alberta. So it's interesting to think that children are also caregivers. Friends, neighbors, and family are caregivers. And we're going to watch a little video in this next screen. Just really it's a quick 30-second video describing what a caregiver is.
Herjot left work to care for his wife. He gets her dressed, assists with meals, and helps her get around safely. Lately, he has felt tired and isolated. Herjot is a caregiver. Are you? Caregivers Alberta believes that caregivers need care too. Contact us at 1-877-453-5088.
And so caregivers are all around us. That's a really quick 30-second video. We have several of those on our website and on our YouTube channel. They're really great to share at family functions or client events in order to bring recognition and awareness to that role. That's the largest piece. People don't often see themselves in that role. They think, well, I'm just the wife, right? I'm just the daughter. So who are Alberta's caregivers? I'm going to share some actual statistics with you, which is kind of interesting to see. So caregivers in Alberta, most people tend to think that it's mostly women, but actually the statistics show that there are just as many male caregivers as female caregivers. Men just even more do not readily identify or recognize themselves in that role, nor do they step forward to ask for help. Tracy talked about in that video earlier how hard it is to ask for help. And that's hard regardless of your gender. But we see in statistically that men are even less likely to ask for help. And so we don't often get the chance to support them, which is sad. But hopefully some of that is changing, and we have men-specific programming that's trying to open the door for that. 1 in 2 are working full-time. So like Tracy mentioned, she had to step away from her work role in order to even care for her spouse. Many people don't have that option. Like, there is no option. They are the single source income for their family, and they have to figure it out how to make it work, and it's challenging, very challenging. 63% are in their prime time earning years. If you look at the age groups there, the largest percentage of caregivers are between the age of 30 and 64. Those are your prime time career growth years, where you usually peak out with your financial contributions, and that is the bulk of where caregivers in Alberta are sitting in that age group, and they're often squeezed, as it was mentioned earlier, between child rearing sometimes and caring for older adults. So this just gives you a picture, a good glimpse of who are our caregivers here in Alberta. Nearly half are caring for a parent. 1 in 10 are caring for a child. 12% are caring for a spouse or a partner. 4% are caring for a sibling. And 16% are not related to the care recipient at all, which is actually really high. But if you think about in your own little circle of your network, who might step forward to support you if you were ill, a lot of times it might be that friend or that neighbor that's even closer to you sometimes than family. And so friends and neighbors find themselves in the caregiving role too. Caregivers are more than just the spouse, just the neighbor, just a friend, just a son or daughter. We are more than that. Caregiving is an additional role, and it's okay to acknowledge that. Just like it's hard to ask for help, it's sometimes very hard as a caregiver to admit you're in that role, because it can be a heavy weight to bear. And, to be honest, some of us, ignorance is bliss. And, if we don't acknowledge ourselves in that role, maybe it's just easier to just keep forging ahead. But it's an additional role that we are playing in our life, and it needs additional supports that come with it. So that's what we're here for, Caregivers Alberta. This is a little more just demographics and care to give you an example of caregivers here in Alberta. 1 in 5 are spending 20 hours a week providing care. Now, imagine if you were a working caregiver and also providing 20 plus hours of additional care at home. That's a lot. That's an additional role. And it's a non-paid role that you're stepping in to serve because you love and because you care. Of course we do. I'll tell you a little bit about my personal history of being a family caregiver. I found myself at the age of 30, after being married for a year, in the hospital with a husband who was severely, severely ill, and he almost died. I had 2 hospitalizations because of a tick and a mosquito. So it's crazy, the tiniest things in your life that can completely change it and flip it upside down. He ended up with very severe encephalitis, which is brain swelling, which caused brain trauma, which caused a whole series, of neurological dysfunction. I was in the hospital talking to the physician who's looking at me, 30 years old, and a husband who's 33, can't walk. They don't know why he can't walk. They don't understand. They think, he gets accused of making that up. It's very traumatic for this experience, right? Well, just put him in long-term care. Are you serious? Talk about a kick in the stomach, right? And so caregiving has many faces, right? It has many experiences that are attached to that. And it needs to be acknowledged, right? I wish that I would have known about an organization like Caregivers Alberta when that happened to me. You don't even see it, even when you're in the middle of it sometimes. I think you live in shock for a long time when it's a catastrophic life change like that. But even when it's slow in coming, even if it's a slow change in your life, it doesn't make it any easier. And so we are here to help the almost 1 million caregivers in Alberta, providing 619 hours of unpaid care a year, saving our economy $11.5 billion a year. So if we paid you, if you were paid for the time that you're doing that unpaid care, that's the cost it would be at an average wage for a care aide. Shocking, isn't it? And it's only the burden of that family and friend caregiving is likely just going to continue to grow, right? So what is the true cost of caregiving on the caregiver? What are some of those signs that Tracy was talking about when she talked about compassion fatigue and caregiver burnout? Because it's so easy to say, no, I'm fine, I'm good. And it's easier to tell yourself that too than acknowledge that maybe you're not fine. And then next thing you know, you're falling off a cliff. Guess what? That's okay to fall off the cliff. That's our motto. It's okay not to be okay. Our caregiver coaches say that a lot to our clients because it's going to happen. There's no way you can just balance it all and stay perfectly even. That's just not reality, right? So these are some of the other signs of what caregiver burnout looks like. It's a result often of having difficulty asking for help. It's feeling as though you're the only person capable of providing care. So we just heard that in the story earlier. Difficulty saying no, high expectations of yourself and others. What does that lead to? All right, these are the signs. I said that in the previous slide, but these are the signs. What does that lead to? Lack of energy, frequently sick. It's very common for a caregiver to say, oh my gosh, I just cannot get over feeling like crap. I'm always tired, I'm always exhausted, or the moment I get rid of one cold, I just get another. Well, because caregiving and that stress really taxes your immune system. This is what happens. But sometimes if you can see some of that coming, then maybe you can bring out that humble card in yourself and ask for help. And that's one of the things that we're here to exist, bring awareness to the role of what caregiving is, and refer to resources like you've seen here today to help make that journey a little bit easier. There's a mental health impact. We know that being a caregiver, maybe you're caring for somebody with mental health challenges, but that puts a tax, it stresses your own mental health as well, right? These are some of the actual statistics that caregivers they've verbally said that they feel somewhat or very stressed, 28%. 19% say they feel their physical or emotional health are suffering. 42% feel short-tempered or irritable. That's hard, right? To keep going about that caregiving role if you're feeling really short-tempered and irritable. You got a short fuse. 39% say they feel overwhelmed. And so caregivers are at a very high risk of depression, anxiety, and stress. And we talk about that in our programs. We talk about how to attempt to manage that stress, how to acknowledge anxiety and see the signs of depression, because it's a very high risk population, caregivers are. 1 in 2 caregivers report feeling fatigue. It affects the sleep. It affects the sleep quality, especially if you're in the home caring for someone who is up and down and not resting well themselves, and you're up and down and trying to care for them, right? So it definitely affects the quality and the quantity of sleep. So lack of sleep, extra chores, heavy lifting, stress-related illnesses, and a compromised immune system are some of the physical challenges that caregivers experience. The financial challenges: 51% miss days of paid work. 66% incur extra expenses, so things that aren't covered by, under insurance policies or, under medical health care. 14% have to then reduce hours or step back from work. 85% admit that they have financial hardship or had to defer to their savings or retirement. That's a large number. 18% have care-related expenses that are causing additional financial hardship then on the family. That affects the entire family, right? We recognize, and many of our partners in healthcare recognize this too, that there are systemic challenges that contribute to some of these things that are happening to caregivers. 43% say, well, they need more information and advice. And so that's good for us to hear if we're working in healthcare or some sort of supportive services to community, because I don't think we can ever give too much information or advice. Now, Tracy's example was also really lovely about don't hand somebody a giant binder full of resources, right when they're dealing with some very shocking information, or if you can obviously tell they're exhausted and fatigued and overwhelmed. Well, don't put like 5 things in their hand, right? Maybe just 1 or 2 things at a time, but continuing to share additional resources and support is part of what we strive to do. We really strive to be the hub of knowledge for caregivers, so that they can turn to us and they can pick up the phone and call us and say, this is my challenge, this is where I live, I can't find, I don't know what to do, I don't know where else to turn, and sometimes we happen to know about a resource that they don't know about. And can I tell you how gratifying and exciting that is to be able to share that information with them? It's awesome. So making sure we're aware of resources, like the other organizations in this room, is also an important part of the role that we serve in community. 33% say they want more help from healthcare professionals. We hear often, as I'm sure will not be surprising in this room, well, I need more support at home. I need more home health care. I need more hours. I need more, that's a chronic thing that we hear. And it's a systemic issue. It's a systemic challenge. And we acknowledge that. And so I'll talk about a little bit later. We attempt to do public advocacy and public awareness to bring attention to that and hopefully inform changes to policy. Nearly half of all caregivers say that their relationship with the person they're caring for is improved, or it becomes closer because of that relationship, but often it affects the other relationships in your life. So as a caregiver, you're often spending more time caring for someone. If you're balancing work, then again, you're balancing 2 or 3 different jobs once you figure in the caregiving job. It's a job, it's a role. And so it often decreases your own time to spend with family and friends outside of those two core things you're trying to balance, right? Even if you're not working, it affects the relationships you have in your life. So it's interesting to recognize that and acknowledge that. And again, normalize it. It's okay. It's okay. Let's talk about it, because if we don't acknowledge things like that, there's no chance of bringing the awareness, bringing the recognition, and finding more support. Relationship challenges, one in two end up spending less time with their spouse. 35% say they feel their other relationships with family and friends are strained. And 19% say they feel lonely and isolated. So imagine what those stats looked like even during COVID when the supports dropped. There's some really interesting studies that have come out from some of those feelings during the COVID period with caregivers. So we do a lot of work in partnership with researchers and academic universities and partners like that. And so if you go to our website, we have links to some of that research, which is also really interesting. I don't want to go too far down that path because it can be boring, but if you're interested in that kind of stuff, we do offer the linkages to that. So who's taking care of the caregiver? That's why our organization was founded. We want to support that person who's being the glue that's holding everything together. So our organization was founded by a group of female caregivers who just happened to discover themselves in that role and realized that there was all supports available for the person they were caring for in the healthcare system, and nothing really for them. And that's still the case, today, essentially 20 years later. There's not much supports built into healthcare and that part of the system to support the caregiver. And that's why our organization was founded, because of that very reason. So a lot of people think that when they hear Caregivers Alberta, that we are a healthcare organization or a home care or private care organization, and we're not. We don't support the care recipient. We're supporting you, who's supporting the care recipient. And so what does that look like exactly? We really exist to empower and support caregivers' well-being. And so Tracy mentioned one of the programs that we offer is called Compass for the Caregiver, and it really does focus on this well-being piece, that self-care, because it is imperative that as caregivers we allow ourselves to ask for help and allow us that time and those breaks for self-care, because if we don't, then we aren't able to be there to care for someone who is depending on us, right? So our vision is in Alberta where caregivers are valued, respected, and supported. These are some of the programs and services we offer. First and foremost, what has always been the founding program and service of the organization has been the caregiver support line, a call line. So I mentioned the founders of the organization. They found each other, and they found the value in that conversation and someone else hearing what they were going through that actually understood. And so that was the first thing they offered. They opened up a call line. Just pick up the phone and call us. We will be the listening ear to just listen. Maybe you just need to vent. Maybe you're angry and frustrated and irritable. You're in that statistic there. Great. Sure, lay it out on us. We're not going to take it personal. We know what it's like. We are that listening ear, that understanding ear, and once the venting is over, it's okay. Well, let's see how we can help. Again, maybe we're aware of resources, support that you're not aware of. Maybe we're not, right? But we are here to listen, and we are here to help. We've just started in the last 2 years a new program called Caregiver Coaching, and that really takes that peer support to the next level. And so the staff we have in those roles are trained in areas of social work and psychology and mental health, and so they're very well equipped than to sort of take that conversation from just peer support or even peer education from understanding the experience to, all right, what do you need as a caregiver? And how can I help you address those needs? And it's really kind of a mind shift, because then when you ask a caregiver that, they'll still say, well, I need more home care hours for my husband. That is very true, okay? But what do you need just for you that has nothing to do with your care recipient? And it's hard to get them talking in that space and thinking about them, but again, it's necessary. And so that's what our coaches do. That's not to say that our coaches don't help family members find additional supports for their loved one, because that is a piece of what they do as well. But they're really there to support the caregiver and help the caregiver identify specific areas where they need support in. So we use an assessment tool called the CSNAT, which is the Caregiver Needs Assessment Tool. And it asks questions like, okay, do you need more information about the illness or whatever's happening to your care recipient? Do you need more information about that? Is that what's stressing you out? Do you need more time to yourself? Is it your physical health that's really failing? Is it your mental health that's really failing? And so we use this evidence-based assessment tool that's designed to be conversation. It's not a piece of paper that you hand the client and say, check these boxes, because that's not what it's about. It's about a conversation. But so our caregiver coaches help the caregivers find and identify those areas where they're struggling in order to see, well, okay, what are the steps we can take to improve that? Maybe not fix it and make it completely better, but improve it just a little bit. And so that's what our caregiver coaching program does. Our compass for the caregiver, I'll show a slide that gives you like a brief overview of that content. We also offer education sessions. We offer caregiver support communities. And again, we're involved in policy and advocacy. We sit on many different advisory panels and leadership tables to make sure that the voice of caregivers is always present in the other work that's being done. So this is sort of just obviously some bullet points of what happens in a coaching session. Our coaching sessions are free. They do not cost. We also make it very clear that our coaching sessions are not therapy. It's not counseling, but it's coaching. It's again, help you identify where are the areas of challenge and what do you need to make a small step in the right direction, right? So our caregiver coaching is done just through phone and Zoom at this point. We have staff stationed all over the province and in specific regions. We have a staff member in Red Deer who's actually here with us today, and I can embarrass the heck out of her and make her stand up and say hi. But she's Tanya's and based out of Red Deer. We have a coach down south in Medicine Hat. We have several, Edmonton, Calgary, which of course are your main regions. Our office location, the only office that the organization has ever had, has been based out of Edmonton. And so the mandate has always been to serve the entire province, and which is why the core service has always been a phone call line, a phone support line. Because how do you logistically have, an organization of 4 people that's supporting the entire province? Well, phone support is how they initially started doing that, right? And now we are, in the last 3 years, thanks to some Alberta health funding, have been able to stage and get staff in various areas throughout the province to be able to do in-person community things like this. Maybe we can't offer in-person coaching sessions to every single client, but if someone wants that and requests that, like if we have staff in your area, we try and make that work, right? So we've also found, I say that COVID was a little bit of a blessing in disguise for organizations like us that mainly have support services through phone or conversation type support versus an actual physical support. Pre-COVID, people really weren't keen on the idea of accessing services through video chat, right? If you were going to attend a program, it had to be in person. Well, then COVID happened, and suddenly all of us had to learn how to live in a virtual world and attend programs in a virtual environment. Well, we have found that has been a blessing in disguise for our reach, because more caregivers were willing to try and attend a Compass for the Caregiver online. More people were willing to tune in to a lunch and learn or an education session that was virtual and not in person. And what does that mean? That means rather than serving 4 people in an Edmonton office location, we're serving 25 people all across the province. So, opening up to the virtual delivery of services has been really wonderful and allowed us to reach a lot more caregivers. So it's awesome, right? We're also excited to be back to getting to do in-person stuff like this, which is great. It feels good to finally, observe eyes and faces in the room. Our caregiver support communities, again, is what I would call the core foundation of our organization, that peer support. Because I mentioned the call line, we say we pick up and we're the listening ear. And that's based around peer support and peer education, peer learning process. When I reflect back to that moment in the hospital when the physician was telling me, to put my 33-year-old husband in a long-term care community, and I thought, the waves of emotions that came at that time and continue to come after that. If I had been able to talk to somebody who had been through that, it would have really changed the trajectory of my own health and wellness. It took years and years for me to have a healthier approach to caregiving, frankly. And the peer support is huge. To hear someone say, "Oh my God, that's horrible. I'm sorry." Not, "Oh, well, I wish I could help." That's true. Like all of these things are true, but to actually sit and speak to someone who knows what it's like to feel that emotion is crucial. And so our peer support communities, we offer them virtually. We offer them 3 times a week, and it changes depending on the season. Like, sometimes interest in programs and services wanes, and so then we might only have 1 caregiver support community available during that period. But right now, we're offering them on Mondays at 10 a.m. I don't remember I think it's Tuesday or Wednesday. There's an evening one on Tuesday or Wednesday, and then there's a Thursday afternoon one as well. Our coaching services are available between the hours of 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday. So our phone line is open 9 to 4:30, right? Just a basic call line support service. But caregiver coaching, you make appointments for, and so we make sure that we've expanded our hours and scheduled the staffing accordingly to be able to, meet some of those caregivers who are still working to a typical workday hours. What's this one? Oh, education sessions. So I mentioned that, years ago, pre-COVID, our lunch and learns were basically just done at our Edmonton office, or maybe they were occasionally done at a partner location, in another area, such as today, like, something like this. But it wasn't very often because the organization's always traditionally been very small. So we offer lunch and learns virtually, just like Wellspring was talking about earlier, and have actually found, again, really great attendance and really great reception, and the ability we always provide space for conversation after any type of program that we do for caregiver clients. So their voice can be heard if it needs to be heard at that time. And so we always open the table for Q&A, and I gotta tell you, it's facilitating those conversations, whether it's a peer support group or at the end of a lunch and learn. It's super cool to see the people and where they're joining us from. And there's still so many similarities regardless of where you are located, but that shared knowledge, I think, is a big piece of support for caregivers. So that's pretty cool. This is our Compass program. It is a registered program. It's a course. It's a workshop. It has a curriculum attached to it. It's been delivered for the last almost 15 years now. So it's been around for a long time. That doesn't mean it hasn't gone through its own updates and edits. We try to make the content still very relevant to today, but this is what it's about. It's about recognizing the role of a caregiver. Who are you outside of the caregiving role? And so those of you who raised your hand earlier and said, I'm a caregiver, think, I'm not gonna make anybody talk, but think for a moment, who are you outside of that role? What are some of your personal strengths and or personal weaknesses? Because when we're in the valley, it is an opportunity to grow, as Phil said. Who are you? And that's where we start with Compass. Yes, you're a caregiver. I'm validating that role with you. I see it. It sucks sometimes. But who are you outside of that role? Because we can't step into managing the stress, balancing the change in relationships, or navigating for the journey ahead if we don't see our own strengths and weaknesses in that process too, so that we know where to ask for support and we know where to pull out our muscle where we can, where we've got it. And so that's what the Compass program is all about. It is a 4-week program. Well, I'm sorry. It's a 4-module program. We have partners in this program who deliver it, in smaller chunks at a support group for 8 or 10 weeks. We have many partners in this program across the province. And if you are a partner in that program, you're free to deliver the content, again, at the pace that works for your community members that you're serving it to, right? But it is a partnered and licensed program. It's content that we own. And again, it's been around for a long time. Wendy and Ellen are both very familiar with that program, and some of you else in the room probably are as well. So this is some of the responses that we hear from people who attend Compass, which is cool to say, to acknowledge and say, well, I felt heard. I learned something new. Having someone to help was the difference in crashing and coping. It can make the difference in not falling off that cliff, or can make the difference because you have fallen off the cliff. So what can you do for caregivers? Those of you in this room who are maybe not a direct, what we would say primary caregiver, maybe you're in a support role of someone who is a caregiver. Maybe you're working for an organization that is supporting caregivers. These are some of the things that you can do to help ease their stress and help make it just a little bit easier on the journey, right? Acknowledge them as part of the care team. There's a huge education push right now through one of our partners with the University of Alberta to do caregiver-centered care in healthcare professions and other in community-based services just like ourselves too. Like, what does caregiver-centered care look like? We've heard the term centered care for a long time, patient-centered care, but what does caregiver-centered care mean? How do we work with the caregiver and integrate them into the care team? How do we address their experience? How do we help them recognize their stress? How do we provide referrals to programs and resources? That means we gotta, know them first. And if you don't know them, know where to say, I don't know what you would do, but you know what? Here, I think maybe if you talk to this person, they might know. Encouraging them to find things that bring them joy. That's one of the things that we often close with from a peer support group, because sometimes the peer support groups share some heavy stuff. And so we try to close on an upbeat is what the staff says, our support staff saying. So that's an example, so that when you walk away today, I want you to think of one thing that brings you joy. And because even in the midst of the valley, in the midst of the darkness and the tunnel, like there's joy that we can either look forward to or discover there as a tiny glimmer of light. So if you are someone who is supporting caregivers through community-based services or through healthcare, we have a digital referral link. We establish referral pathways with partners so you can do a warm handoff with your clients. So to make sure that you're aware of our services, caregivers can get handed all kinds of flyers and pamphlets and then go home and see it just gets tossed on the table with a mountain of other paperwork or lost in a drawer. So if you're sitting there and supporting a caregiver and a care recipient and you're aware of us, please ask them and say, you know what, have you heard of Caregivers Alberta? And if they haven't, may I share your name and contact information, basic, whether you want email or phone, you tell me. And may they reach out to you, because we have free supportive services for caregivers to access. The only thing that costs to access in our programs and services is the Compass program, because it has a curriculum, it has materials costs that comes with it, including a facilitator, right, and the time that it takes to do that. But our coaching and our support line and our assistance trying to navigate through, what can be a confusing healthcare system sometimes, it's all free. So please, let people know about us and use us and lean on us. And we're here not just for caregivers, but for you as well, to help support caregivers, because we are only as strong as the entire network that we create is. So we've got to join hands and join forces in order to better support caregivers in our province. Oh, I always like to share this, an example of what does a client think about our coaching services. Well, this is what they think. They often say that it is not just supportive, but empowering, and that is the focus of our work, whether that's coaching, whether that's Compass, whether that's a peer support group. It's attempting to empower us in that role as family caregivers. This is Caregiver Centered Care for the Education. I just mentioned it briefly, and I always like to share the link because this is one of our important partners. We contributed to the development of this education, and it's free, and it's really great. It's self-paced e-learning, so it's not for everybody. But again, it's a really, really wonderful resource if you work in the space of healthcare on how to integrate a caregiver-centered approach and keeping them in the discussion as well. So this is our contact info. That's who we are. I always like to close with the opportunity to take questions, and please feel free to share questions. And if you're online and you have a way to submit questions, I don't. You've learned something about us through this presentation that helps you if you're a family caregiver or a friend or someone supporting caregivers here in the province. So thank you for having us today, and thank you again, Wendy and Ellen, for putting all this together. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody got questions they want to throw at me? Is the room mute? It's always, yeah.
Crickets thing.
I know, crickets.
Well, thank you so much, Jonna. That was wonderful, and it's so nice. It's actually a little scary to see some of the earlier stats, actually, but it is nice to know that we do all have those supports out there. We just need to be brave enough to access them. So that kind of somewhat brings us to the end of our afternoon. I want to thank everyone for coming out. If you can take an opportunity to fill out the evaluation on the table, that would be greatly appreciated. And thank you to those who have joined us online as well. We appreciate you spending your afternoon with us as well. So we will sign off, I guess, on the online individuals, and we do have a few more draws for those of you who are still here in person. So thank you all for coming, and thank you to all of our vendors and who came and participated as well, because you sure shared a lot of information for people as well. So thank you so much. Website, and we do tend to keep our information there. It'll be under Innisfil as the location.
Do you want these left on the table?
Yeah, you can leave the evaluations on the table.